Hey guys! Tonight we slip into the dim, velvet hush of a medieval chamber. Not a modern bedroom with blackout curtains and weighted blankets, but something quieter, stranger, and far more sacred. You're barefoot on cool stone. A rush mat crackles underfoot. The candles flicker not because of a draft, but because sleep in this world is watched by saints, by servants, by superstition. You step toward the bed. It's tall, wooden, and partially enclosed like a miniature chapel. Curtains hang heavy with embroidered angels, and beneath them lies not just a mattress, but a shrine. You're not just going to bed, you're preparing your soul for a small death. In noble homes, especially in the late Middle Ages, sleep wasn't casual, it was ritual. It began with hand-washing in a brass basin, sometimes accompanied by a servant softly reciting a psalm. You kneel beside the bed not out of exhaustion, but reverence. A candle is extinguished, and the air shifts from wakefulness to stillness. You feel watched. Not in a creepy way, though. Give it time. But in a spiritual one. You lie down as if positioning yourself for an audience with heaven. The bed faces east, symbolically toward Jerusalem and resurrection. The sheets may be perfumed with lavender or rosewater, assuming you're upper class. If not, the perfume is whatever the hay in your straw mattress picked up on the farm that day. And here's the thing, you probably won't survive. Your dreams might be read aloud by your confessor. Yep. In some noble courts, servants or confessors might inquire about your dreams the next morning, not out of nosiness, but because dreams were believed to be windows into divine or demonic intent. Sleep was not just rest, it was theater, confession, prophecy, and judgment rolled into one. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing how far this sleepy little medieval journey travels. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You pull the embroidered curtain shut. The world narrows. The room goes soft around the edges. A carved headboard above you features a miniature Last Supper, reminding you that Christ, 2. Lay down in sacred rest. There's a small dish of holy water nearby. Some dipped fingers in it before sleep, tracing crosses on foreheads or pillows. And if you're particularly anxious, you've tucked a psalter or small relic beneath your bed frame just in case your dreams take a turn. Mainstream historians agree. Sleep in medieval aristocratic households was a formal, sometimes religiously coded ritual. It reflected social status and moral structure. But here's a quirky twist. Beds weren't just for sleeping. They were symbols of inheritance. In some wills, a bed frame passed down generations like a title. And let's not forget that in the inventory of Queen Elizabeth of York, her bed was listed as covered with white satin, the tester of crimson velvet, fringed with gold, which sounds comfy, and terrifyingly flammable. Now here's where historians still argue. Did medieval people genuinely experience sleep as spiritual practice? Or are we romanticizing it from afar, mistaking symbolic gestures for deep belief? The debate simmers. Some claim the rituals were mostly performative. Others believe the candlelit quiet and whispered psalms reflected a profound medieval reverence for the unknown hours of the night. Meanwhile, outside the curtained bed, time moved differently. Without digital clocks or even consistent candle marking systems, the hours of night were measured by bells, prayers, and instinct. The body's surrender to sleep mirrored the soul's hoped-for surrender to grace. You weren't simply getting some shut-eye, you were preparing for either a visit from the divine or a reminder of your own mortality. You roll slightly to your side, just so, facing the east, hips aching slightly against straw-filled linen. You whisper a final prayer, perhaps the Latin "In manus tuas, Domin," into your hands. O Lord, whether you believed in angels or just wanted to avoid bad luck, sleep was a passage through something sacred. And just as your eyes begin to close, a servant knocks softly, not to disturb you, but to remind you your soul isn't alone tonight. The chamber fades behind you, and now you're walking barefoot through long corridors of stone and silence. The air is cooler here. You've stepped into a monastery where sleep follows not whim, but sacred rhythm. Monastic sleep in medieval Europe wasn't about comfort. It was about obedience. You feel it in your bones as you pass narrow wooden doors, each leading to a tiny cell. Inside, a cot, a blanket, a wooden cross nailed above the pillow. If you're lucky, no privacy, no indulgence, no fluff. Just the essentials for body and for soul. Benedictine monks, Cistercians, Carthusians. They all had their own rules, but they shared one thing. Sleep was never entirely yours. It belonged to the rule. The most common was the Rule of Saint Benedict, written around the 6th century and still guiding lives well into the medieval period. According to it, your sleep was chopped into pieces, shaped around a strict timetable of prayer and work. You didn't choose when to rest. You slept when the bell allowed it. And the bell didn't always care if you were tired. You're lying in a cold stone room, wrapped in a scratchy blanket. When the bell rings for matins, the night prayer, it could be 2 a.m., 3 a.m. It doesn't matter. You rise, sleep still clinging to your face, and shuffle down the corridor in silence. The moon spills through stained glass. No one speaks. You're half dreaming, but fully obedient. Historians agree, monasteries used fragmented sleep to enforce humility and discipline. But here's the quirky part some monks believed. Sleep made you vulnerable to sin. Drowsiness could open a door in your soul. Dream too sweetly, and the devil might sneak in, which is why some monks slept upright in chairs to avoid dreaming altogether. Try that tonight. See how it goes. There's even a medieval monk named Peter Damian who wrote a very serious letter condemning luxurious sleeping habits. According to him, too much sleep made the body soft, and softness led to temptation. His solution: straw beds, little sleep, and no pillows. No thanks, Peter. But monks weren't the only ones treating sleep like a sacred challenge. The Vitae Saints biographies often included dream visions. Some monks recorded their dreams as divine encounters. Saints saw angels, demons, even glimpses of heaven. And some monasteries kept dream journals, believing that sleep could be a sacred doorway into the divine. Still, historians debate how literal these dreams were. Did monks truly believe their nighttime visions were sent from above? Or did they quietly acknowledge, behind closed chapel doors, that maybe it was just indigestion from the communal lentil stew? You ease into one of these cells now, pulling the rough blanket over your shoulders. The wooden floor groans beneath you. There are no candles, only moonlight, and the faint flicker of stars through a tiny slit window. The bell will ring again soon for lauds, the dawn prayer. Your sleep is brief. It is disciplined. It is sort of holy. Before your eyes close, you hear the whisper of a psalm. In noctibus extolate manus vestras, lift up your hands in the night. Whether or not you understand Latin, the rhythm is soothing, a heartbeat from 1,000 years ago still echoing gently in the dark. And just as you drift off, you remember one more detail. The monks believed sleep could reveal your spiritual state. If you slept soundly, it was a sign of divine favor. But if you tossed and turned, well, maybe you had something to confess. So you lie still, breathe deep, pretend you're blameless, and let the candleless dark cradle you until the bell decides your soul has had enough rest. You wake up in the dark, but not for the first time, and not for the last. You're caught between sleeps now, in that strange medieval rhythm. Modern folks have mostly forgotten. The room is hushed, but not silent. Outside your wooden shutters, a dog barks once. A rooster considers his options. Somewhere in the village, someone's already stoking a fire. But you're drifting through what medieval people called the watch, that curious middle space between first sleep and second sleep. See, back then, most Europeans didn't expect one long, uninterrupted 8-hour snooze. Instead, they naturally fell into a pattern. They'd sleep for a few hours first sleep, then wake for an hour or two. They might read, pray, stoke the fire, even visit a neighbor. Then they'd return to bed for second sleep, which carried them into morning. And no, this isn't just some cozy myth. It's supported by medical texts. diaries, and even court records. One 15th century doctor explicitly advised patients to do light reading during the watch. So if you've ever found yourself mysteriously awake at 3 a.m., congratulations, you're accidentally medieval. But here's where it gets a little weird. You sit up in your straw bed, the hearth glows faintly. Maybe you light a small taper candle, whisper a prayer, or maybe not so piously you creep outside, just for a moment, because this was also the hour of mischief. Historians note that many illicit activities happened during the watch. Secret affairs, quiet thefts, whispered confessions. There was something about the in-between hours that made people bold or stupid. And there's another layer. The watch was prime ghost time. According to medieval folklore, the soul was most vulnerable between the two sleeps. Dreams from first sleep were said to be unreliable, caused by heavy food or daily stress. But second sleep dreams, those came from the divine or the demonic. Depending on what you saw, you might wake up sweating from a nightmare and pray it wasn't a premonition. You might consult your village wise woman the next day, asking if the image of black dogs meant illness or just indigestion. And here's your quirky fringe detail. In some alpine villages, people believed witches traveled during the watch not on broomsticks, but as spirits, slipping out of their sleeping bodies and riding the night wind. There's even a 14th century record where a woman confessed she flew during the watch, though she claimed she didn't do it on purpose, which is kind of a flex. So, as you sit in your bed, staring into flickering shadows, you start to wonder, is that creak on the floor just the house settling, or something older? Even now, historians argue, was this segmented sleep a true physiological pattern, or just an adaptation to artificial lighting's absence? Some claim it's biologically natural, citing studies where modern people, deprived of electric light, return to biphasic sleep patterns. Others say it was a culturally conditioned habit, shaped by monastic bells and early farming routines. You lie back down, halfway between belief and science. The bed's still warm. The air feels heavier now, as if the night itself has thickened. You pull the blanket tighter, not out of fear, necessarily, but reverence. These hours matter. The second sleep comes slower, richer. Sometimes it brings visions, sometimes nothing at all. And sometimes, if you're truly unlucky, it brings the ALP. The ALP is a little gremlin-like creature from German folklore. He sits on your chest while you sleep, pressing your lungs and stealing your breath. Sound familiar? Yep, sleep paralysis. Medieval edition. The ALP doesn't just choke. He whispers secrets in your ear. Some people believed he fed on fear, or dreams, or both. It's where we get the word nightmare, referring to this malicious spirit, not a bad dream. So when your eyes snap open suddenly, your body frozen, and your breath shallow, well, don't panic. Just remember to leave some milk out. The ALP prefers bribes over battles. Your candle's burned low now. The hearth's glow has faded to embers. Outside, the sky shifts ink blue to steel gray. Dawn creeps toward the hills. Second sleep holds you for just a while longer. Cradled in the oldest rhythm your body still remembers, but your mind forgot. And with that, you drift off again, not because you're lazy, but because history says it's time. You stretch under a wool blanket and immediately regret it. A bit of straw pokes through the ticking and jabs you in the thigh. Your shoulders sore. Your hips ache. And you smell faintly of sheep, or is that the mattress? Welcome to the complicated world of medieval bedding, where comfort was both a luxury and, occasionally, a sin. You roll to your side, testing the difference between rich and poor sleep firsthand. If you're a noble, your bed is a heavy, carved thing raised off the floor like a throne. The mattress, stuffed with feathers. Goose, if you're lucky, I'd down. If you're royal, you've got linen sheets painstakingly woven and blankets of dyed wool, possibly even imported from Flanders. Pillows embroidered with gold thread rest under your head and tucked near your heart. A perfumed sachet of dried herbs, lavender, rose, and a little mint for dreams. If you're a peasant, different story. Your mattress is a sack of straw or dried leaves, laid directly on the floor or on wooden planks. Your blanket is more like a heavy cloak. If you're lucky, you have one thin pillow, more of a folded cloth. Really? And if your house is cold, which it always is, your best hope is body heat, usually shared with your spouse. children, and possibly a chicken or two. But here's the funny thing. Too much comfort was suspicious. Medieval theologians warned that enjoying softness could corrupt your soul. There are sermons that literally equate feather beds with temptation. If your bed felt too good, some claimed it might lead you to dreams of lust, laziness, or even worse, questioning your lot in life. Monks especially took a dim view of luxury bedding. For them, anything beyond straw was indulgent. The harder the bed, the holier the monk, which explains a lot of cranky Latin poetry. You lift your head slightly and eye the surroundings. In noble households, sleep was often communal in unexpected ways. Servants might sleep on pallets in the same room as their lords. Traveling guests might share your chamber and yes, sometimes even your bed. Not out of scandal, but necessity. Beds were valuable, warm, and rare. Sharing one didn't mean anything, until it did. One quirky fact. In 13th century England, there was an entire market for second-hand beds, like a thriving one. Bed thefts were even recorded in local court rolls. Imagine someone breaking into your home not for silver or gold, but for your mattress. Now, here's where the debate among historians heats up. Was comfort truly seen as sinful by most people, or is that just what the church wanted to believe? Some researchers argue that people still valued coziness in private, sneaking in a few feathers or soft linens despite sermons to the contrary. Others say the tension between comfort and morality was deeply internalized. People truly feared judgment for enjoying rest too much. And don't forget the smells. Hygiene wasn't great. Beds had to be aired out regularly. Infestations weren't rare. In some cities, bed makers offered professional delousing. A high-end mattress might be worth several months' wages, but only if it wasn't full of bed bugs. As you lie there, wiggling to find a position that doesn't pinch, you realize the most sacred thing about sleep wasn't always the act itself. It was the space you did it in. The bed wasn't just furniture, it was a private altar, a symbol of rank, a confession booth for the body, and sometimes a battlefield. Because yes, beds were also where people died, and where they were born, and where confessions were whispered to priests just before the last breath. That same pillow you now rest on. It may have cradled a newborn and, years later, a final sigh. The line between slumber and death was so thin, they practically overlapped. You shift slightly, your limbs heavy, your thoughts drifting. Somewhere down the road, a dog howls once and falls silent, and beneath your straw mattress, you suspect someone hit a charm, an old bone, a saint's ribbon, or just a stone with initials carved into it. Something to ward off bad dreams. Because even in sleep, you weren't alone, not entirely. You finally settle it into something resembling comfort, if not in your mattress. Then at least in your position, and just as your breath slows, your eyes droop, and the night presses softly in. You remember, posture matters, not just for your back, for your soul. In medieval Europe, how you slept said something about who you were. Face down, sinful, curled like a cat, childish, on your back, hands crossed like a corpse. Now we're getting somewhere toward heaven, or at least toward proper discipline. But the preferred pose was lying on your right side, facing east. Why east? That's where the sun rose. That's where Jerusalem sat, spiritually speaking. That's the direction of resurrection. So if you died in your sleep, which, let's be honest, happened more often than you'd like, it helped to already be aligned for divine convenience. You tuck your knees slightly. One hand rests near your heart, the other curled beneath a pillow. Speaking of which, the pillow isn't just for your neck. It's for your conscience. In noble homes, pillows were embroidered with prayers or verses. In some cases, those words were stitched with actual gold thread, believed to ward off evil dreams. If you were especially devout, or just paranoid, you might sleep with a relic tucked beneath it. A saint's finger bone, a splinter of wood from the true cross, a bit of thread touched to a martyr's tomb. Uncomfortable, definitely. But hey, better insomnia than eternal damnation. And you didn't just flop into bed without ceremony. You prayed. Every night, even the average layperson whispered some form of evening prayer. The most popular was a version of "Now I lay me down to sleep," though in Latin and usually more dire. Libera me, Domen. de mort aeterna. Deliver me, O Lord, from eternal death. You know, just light bedtime stuff. One charming detail. Some households kept a special candle for nighttime prayers called a bedlight. It was lit only for moments of reflection before sleep and extinguished with a specific breath, steady, slow, reverent, not rushed. Because in that final moment before the flame died, you were metaphorically releasing your day, your sins, maybe even your body. Historians agree that these rituals mattered. They weren't just formalities. Sleep was believed to be spiritually porous. Your soul could drift, dream, wander, and anything could sneak in. So, setting yourself properly, body, mind, and mattress was like locking the door to your subconscious. Here's a strange tidbit. In some Slavic villages, people believed that sleeping with your feet pointed toward a doorway invited death to enter. So beds were rotated seasonally to avoid unintentional funerals. And if someone did die during the night, their pillow was burned. No reuse, not even for the cat. But the scholars still argue, was all this ritual universal, or was it mainly observed by the pious, the wealthy, and the literate? It's hard to say. There's evidence that even illiterate peasants had charms, sayings, or routines passed orally through generations. And while they may not have embroidered verses on their pillows, they sure knew better than to sleep with their head to the west. You roll again, not out of discomfort, but alignment. Your toes twitch under the blanket. The air smells like beeswax and cold stone. You imagine someone hundreds of years ago doing the exact same thing. Pulling the sheet over their chin, folding their hands, whispering a prayer into linen. And maybe, just maybe, you feel safer because of it. You sink a little deeper into the mattress, no longer worrying about posture or purity. But before you disappear completely into dreams, one final ritual remains, a sign of the cross, a whispered Amen, a breath that's not just exhalation but release. You're deep in sleep now, somewhere between memory and myth, when suddenly there's chanting, not in your room, but in your dream. Or is it outside your window? You can't tell. The sound bends space. Your body stays still, but your spirit lurches forward, pulled toward a name you've probably never heard, Saint Vitus. You shuffle barefoot through cobblestone streets now, following flickering torchlight. People are gathering. Some are singing, others twitching, trembling, weeping, and they're doing it in his name, because somehow Saint Vitus became the patron saint of involuntary movement, ecstatic trances, and, yes, sacred sleep. It's weird and real. In medieval Europe, especially in Central and Eastern regions, Saint Vitus became associated with strange nighttime visitations. People claimed he came in dreams, whispered prophecies, or less charmingly possessed them with uncontrollable dance. The phenomenon was so widespread that Vitus's dance became an actual medical term for neurological tremors. Historians today identify it as synonyms chorea, a real condition linked to childhood infection. But back then, it was divine or diabolical. You stand in a torch-lit square. A woman beside you begins to shake, then twirl. Her eyes roll back. She weeps, chants, collapses. No one stops her. Because if it's Saint Vitus calling, you don't interrupt. What's most curious, though, is how often his followers describe these moments as peaceful, like sleeping while awake, a trance, a dream you couldn't exit. Some people even claimed they awoke from these fits refreshed, purified, as if something dark had been pulled out of them. You lie back in your imaginary bed, letting the rhythm of the dream settle. It's unsettling, sure, but also beautiful, because even now, historians still debate what it really was. Mass hysteria, ritual healing, the precursor to rave culture. Okay, maybe not that last one, but only maybe. And it wasn't just Vitus. Other saints were said to appear in sleep, especially to the devout and distressed. The Virgin Mary, Saint Catherine, Saint Joseph, they'd offer counsel, warnings, even recipes for healing salves. There's a 12th century nun named Hildegard of Bingen who claimed entire visions came to her in sacred sleep images so vivid and divine, she dictated them into books. Books that are still studied today. But not all of these sleep saints were peaceful. In some regions, people feared being touched by the wrong spirit in their dreams. Enter the incubus and succubus nocturnal demons who seduced, suffocated, or simply stole your energy in the night. And while we'll save those darker guests for later, Saint Vitus stood somewhere in between, feared, revered, misunderstood. One fun fringe detail: some towns held annual Vitus vigils, where people would stay up all night, dancing and praying to avoid being afflicted, which is, let's be honest, a bit like drinking 5 espressos to prevent insomnia. But hey, tradition is tradition. Back in bed, your brow furrows. You wonder, were these dreams just stress-induced hallucinations or sacred portals into another layer of reality? Historians don't agree. Some think the saints were imagined coping mechanisms for trauma. Others argue that medieval minds genuinely believed sleep was a threshold between this world and the divine. You shift again under the blanket, a little uneasy now, because whether or not you believe in saints, something is whispering just outside your dreams. Not malevolent, exactly, but older than language, older than fear. You turn your pillow to the cool side. The candle has long since burned out, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell rings not to wake you, but to mark the hour that saints, sinners, and sleepwalkers all roam together. Saint Vitus doesn't visit tonight. Probably, you jolt awake, not from a dream, but from something real. A noise, a bump, a creak of wood that shouldn't have creaked. Your breath catches, the room is dark, and for a second, you forget which century you're in. Welcome to the world of medieval sleep behaviors where snoring wasn't just annoying, it was ominous, and sleepwalking might get you accused of hosting a demon. Let's start with snoring. In noble courts, it was considered undignified, sometimes even shameful. A chronic snorer could find themselves the subject of jokes or worse, suspicion. Was it gluttony, a hidden illness, a sign you were too fond of wine? And among the devout, snoring was treated as a sign of spiritual laziness. If your soul were truly in a state of grace, wouldn't it rest silently, reverently? Spoiler: no, it would not. Still, that didn't stop people from trying to suppress it. There are records of medieval snoring cures involving herbs, sleeping on hardboards, or even sewing small pebbles into the back of nightshirts to keep people from rolling onto their backs. Effective? Maybe. Comfortable? Absolutely not. But it gets weirder. Sleepwalking now, that was serious. If you rose from your bed in the middle of the night and wandered through the village with glassy eyes, people didn't assume sleep disorder. They assumed possession, or at the very least, a spiritual affliction. Some believe the soul had failed to return to the body properly after dreaming. Others were sure it was a demon dragging you like a puppet. There's even a story from a 14th century French village where a boy, known for nightly wanderings, was brought to the priest and tied to the church altar for purification. He promptly sleepwalked again, ropes and all, dragging a candle holder across the floor until it shattered. The villagers were not reassured. And here's a little-known detail. Some people took it as a bad omen to sleepwalk into another person's house. It meant your spirit was either searching for protection or fleeing from something in your own home. You lie still now, ears perked. That creak was probably the wind, or the beams settling, or maybe not. Even normal behaviors, twitching, muttering, grinding your teeth, could raise eyebrows in certain communities. There's a German folktale about a woman whose nightly murmurs were taken as witchcraft. She was eventually proven innocent when someone realized she was just reciting her husband's debts in her sleep. Honestly, relatable. The debate among historians continues. Were these fears truly believed by everyone? Or were they just the loudest voices, the priests, the chroniclers, the fearful grandmothers? Some argue most villagers probably just rolled over and went back to sleep. Others say the very idea of harmless sleep is modern, that every nighttime behavior was suspect in an age where mystery, faith, and fear slept side by side. And fear, in those days, wasn't just about spirits. There were real dangers too: fires, thieves, even wolves, which is why many homes had strict nighttime rituals. Doors barred with wooden beams, embers carefully smothered, blades placed under pillows. Yes, really to ward off intruders, physical or otherwise. You snuggle deeper under the blanket, oddly comforted by the idea that even medieval folks feared the same things: unseen noises, strange dreams. That weird feeling when your foot hangs off the bed, but just as you're drifting off again, the dog howls, and somewhere far off, another answers. You don't open your eyes at first, not because you're afraid. Exactly. But because you know what's sitting on your chest, it's heavy, silent, watching. And no, it's not the cat. You've just met one of medieval Europe's most feared nighttime visitors, the nightmare demon. More specifically, Amara, an incubus, or sometimes just the thing that steals your breath. You're experiencing what modern medicine calls sleep paralysis, but in the medieval world, it was spiritual warfare. If you woke up frozen, unable to scream, with the weight of 1,000 bricks pressing down on your ribs, the explanation was simple: you were being attacked. There are dozens of names for it. In England, it was the night hag. In Scandinavia, the Mara. In Germany, the Alpi. Each one a creature that creeps into your room, sits on your chest, and presses down until you wake gasping, sweat-soaked and terrified. You lie there now, eyes wide, the room oddly sharp-edged in moonlight. You can't move, and you remember what people were taught to do. Pray, not softly, loudly, if possible. Say the Lord's Prayer backward, or call on Saint Michael. Or, if you're really desperate, curse in Latin. Not recommended if you're a monk. Some households hung protective herbs above the bed: mugwort, vervain, Saint John's wort. Others painted protective runes on doors, or placed iron knives under pillows to repel night demons. And if none of that worked, well, there's always the old bohemian tradition of sleeping with your shoes facing the window, because demons hate orderly footwear, apparently. And it wasn't just folklore. This fear seeped into medicine and theology. Medieval doctors believed nightmares were caused by indigestion, improper humors, or vapors rising from the stomach to the brain. One 12th century text recommends sleeping on your right side with your head slightly elevated to keep evil gases from pooling in your skull. Another warns against eating cheese before bed. Honestly, still good advice. But here's the darker twist. Women were especially vulnerable, or so it was believed. The succubus, a female spirit, was blamed for seducing men in their dreams. But women, if they woke breathless and terrified, it was said a demon lover had found them. Some priests believed frequent nightmares in women were signs of witchcraft, or even secret carnal pacts made during sleep. One unfortunate soul in 15th century Flanders confessed under pressure that she invited the devil nightly by sleeping in shameful positions. The church did not take that well. She was flogged and, ironically, forced to sleep on stone for a month as penance. Because apparently, you can sin in your dreams and still pay for it wide awake. You twitch now, still frozen, but the room feels warmer. Your body, maybe out of sheer rebellion, begins to stir. Your fingers curl, a toe wiggles, the pressure on your chest lifts, and with that, the creature, whatever name you give it, slips away. But sleep doesn't come back easily. You sit up, light a candle, and try to make sense of it. Was it real? A trick of the mind? A spiritual intrusion? Historians are still arguing. Some say these visitations were just misunderstood episodes of sleep paralysis. Others insist that the sheer consistency of the reports across cultures, across centuries, suggests something deeper, something old, something watching. And now that you're fully awake, you check your bed. You notice a charm tucked under the mattress seam, a cross carved into the headboard, a dried sprig of sage near the window frame. Someone in this room, maybe you, maybe not, was afraid of exactly what just happened. You lie down again, a little stiffer this time. The candle flickers, the shadows behave, and slowly, breath by breath, you fall asleep again, one eye open, just in case the candle's gone out again. And this time, you wake not from fear but from noise, metal, footsteps, voices muffled by stone. You're not in a village anymore. You're in a castle, or maybe a royal chamber. And the person across the room hasn't slept all night. You turn and see them, a king, slouched in a carved chair, sleepless, anxious, staring into nothing. Because even with velvet pillows and feather beds, insomnia didn't spare the powerful. In fact, it often devoured them. Medieval rulers were haunted by more than political enemies. They were haunted by their own minds. Chronic sleeplessness was often seen as a symptom of guilt, divine punishment, or spiritual unrest. A good ruler, they said, slept like a lamb, a troubled one, tossed like a soul in purgatory. You creep closer, past a curtain. On the table lies a torn letter, half a candle, and a small bottle, not wine, poppy juice, a medieval sedative made from crushed poppy heads, legal, potent, and sometimes fatal. Insomnia was feared because it made rulers vulnerable. It whispered doubts. It blurred the line between visions and hallucinations, and in the right or wrong mood, it birthed prophecy. Some of the most important medieval decisions came after a bad night's sleep. Edward the Confessor reportedly claimed a vision during sleep that foretold the fate of England. Emperor Constantine allegedly dreamed of the cross before converting to Christianity. Joan of Arc, well, she said her orders came from heaven, delivered right around bedtime. But the line between dreams and madness was thin. In fact, one fringe belief held that repeated sleepless nights could summon demons, not as punishment, but as witnesses, as if the soul, untethered by rest, opened itself to things normally kept out. You start to see why kings feared the dark so much. You tiptoe deeper into the royal quarters. There's a sleeping servant nearby, curled on a pallet, and a queen in the adjoining room, whispering prayers. Everyone in this castle knows if the king doesn't sleep, no one really rests. There's tension in the air, as if peace hangs on whether his eyelids will finally drop. And here's the strange truth. Even though nobles had the best bedding, the finest herbs, the most quiet, they often slept the least. War, taxes, rebellions, whispers from the clergy. Those things don't quiet down just because your room does. There's an old text from a 14th century physician warning against the royal curse of sleeplessness. His prescription: warm goat's milk, violet syrup, and 2 hours of Gregorian chant. Spotify playlist not included. But there's another figure who stirs in the dark, not a king, not a queen, a prophet, sometimes called a visionary, sometimes a madman. These were the dreamers who claimed sleep revealed truth. In some towns, people believed the mad had closer access to God during dreams precisely because their minds were unfiltered. One woman, known only as Agnes of Bakewell, lived alone in a small hut and claimed that every dream she had was a message from St. Thomas. She was visited by priests, nobles, even knights. They'd pay her in bread or coins just to hear what her latest dreams said about harvests, battles, or marriages. Historians today debate whether these prophetic dreamers were truly believed or simply tolerated local entertainment, perhaps, or spiritual insurance policies. But the dreams were recorded, passed around, respected, even feared. You lie back now, gazing up at the arched ceiling of this cold royal chamber. A draft seeps through the stone. You feel the weight of velvet blankets and responsibility, and you realize, in the Middle Ages, sleep wasn't always refuge. Sometimes it was where power unraveled. You're not in a castle anymore. You're barefoot in a garden under a fat, round moon. The grass is damp, the rosemary smells sharp, and somewhere, a sleepy owl just gave you the side-eye. Because tonight, sleep isn't just sacred, it's medicine. In medieval Europe, nighttime was the body's natural time to heal. And sleep wasn't passive, it was curated, carefully, with herbs, rituals, moonlight, and whispered instructions passed down from your grandmother's grandmother. You crouch beside a herbalist. Now her cloak smells like thyme. Her hands are stained green. She plucks a leaf of valerian root, rubs it between her fingers, and tells you it's for calming the nerves. But never boil it, she says, or it'll chase the dreams away. Sleep medicine was everywhere, hidden in kitchen gardens and apothecary scrolls. Lavender bundles hung over beds, chamomile tea, steeped in earthen pots, honey mixed with ground poppy seed, smeared on bread, a dab of rosewater behind the ears. For nobles, it was elegant. For peasants, improvised. But everyone believed sleep could be influenced. One quirky detail: in some parts of Italy, healers prescribed crushed pearls mixed with milk for noble women who couldn't sleep. Effective, doubtful, expensive, devastatingly You trail behind the herbalist as she picks mugwort, known as the dream herb. According to old belief, if you tucked mugworts under your pillow, your dreams would become vivid, sometimes prophetic. But beware, too much, and they said you might fail to return fully from sleep, which sounds suspiciously like dying. Still, the line between healing and harming was always thin in medieval medicine, and scholars today still debate whether these herbal cures were truly effective or just ritual comfort. Was valerian really sedating? Possibly. Was wormwood a gentle sedative? Perhaps if you didn't mind a touch of hallucination. And then there was moonlight. You glance upward. The moon in medieval Europe wasn't just light, it was a force. Some believed it drew sickness out of the body while you slept. Others thought sleeping beneath direct moonlight could make you mad, hence the word lunatic. Yes, really. That's why many households had shutters not just for cold, but for sanity. You weren't supposed to sleep with the full moon touching your face. It could stir dreams, heat the blood, make you restless, or worse, invite something in. As the healer leads you toward the edge of the garden, you pass a small stone circle, half buried in moss. A dream circle, she says. You'd sit inside it, say your troubles aloud, and ask for clarity in sleep. Some even poured wine or milk into the soil, an offering to whatever spirit governed the night. You pause, letting that idea settle. Sleep wasn't just recovery, it was a conversation. You asked for help, left an offering, received a message maybe, maybe not. The night didn't always answer kindly, and not all cures were gentle. There's a recorded case in a 15th century Spanish town where a sleepless man was buried up to his neck in garden soil overnight to cool the blood. He slept. Reportedly, though he later died of unrelated pneumonia, probably unrelated. And in some rural areas, people drank lead-based tonics to sink the spirit. They worked, just not in a survivable way. Back in the garden, the herbalist hands you a bundle of dried sage and whispers a charm. You don't catch all the words, but you understand the intent. Protection, clarity, deep rest. You return to your bed, the garden's scent still clinging to your sleeves. The room is dark. A single candle flickers once, then fades, and as your body folds into the mattress, it doesn't feel like sleep anymore. It feels like healing. The night grows thicker now, warmer, more crowded. You're no longer alone in your bed, not because of ghosts or saints or sleep demons this time, but because you're in a peasant household, and sleep here is a shared ritual. You blink into the dark. You're in a one-room cottage. A child is curled behind your knees. Someone's elbow is pressing into your ribs. And over in the corner, a goat shifts softly in its straw. Because in medieval Europe, especially in rural communities, personal space wasn't a thing. Entire families, sometimes extended ones, slept together, side by side, across straw mats, rough planks, or furs. You didn't sleep alone unless you were dead. And not just people, animals. 2. Chickens under the bed, dogs near the hearth, a piglet by the door. In winter, this wasn't just cozy, it was survival. Body heat was a precious currency, and the cow knew its role. You squirm slightly, careful not to disturb the toddler beside you. Someone mumbles in their sleep, then rolls over, tugging half the blanket with them. It's not elegant, but there's comfort here. Breathing in sync, dreams overlapping, a shared vulnerability that modern bedsheets can't replicate. Still, don't mistake it for peaceful. There were rules. You might sleep together but not too close. Unmarried siblings on opposite ends. Parents between children. Strangers outside the bed, on the floor, near the wall. Violating the sleep map could lead to gossip, or worse. And sleep wasn't entirely private. If you groaned, muttered, or dreamed aloud, someone heard, someone remembered. There's a court record from a 14th century Scottish village where a man's dream confession about stealing bread was repeated by his brother, who shared the same bed. Result: public shaming and a minor penance. You roll onto your back now, the ceiling just inches above your face. Someone's breath whistles softly. The fire's embers pop. Outside, wind rattles the wooden shutter. This was also the world of peasant dreams. And while nobles dreamed of saints and omens, villagers dreamed of weather, of wolves, of wheat. And they took those dreams seriously. A dream of rain meant a failed harvest. A dream of teeth falling out foretold death. And if you dreamed of moonlight on a still pond, some said you'd fall in love by the next full moon. Others said you were cursed. Dream interpretation was a bit inconsistent, quirky detail. Some villages kept dream interpreters older women, usually who charged a few coins or a hunk of bread to explain your visions. If you dream of blood, one might say, expect guests. If you dream of goats, you've got trouble brewing, especially if the goat talks back. But dreams weren't always trusted. In fact, some believed they came from outside, from spirits that used your mind like a message board. So, if your dream was dark or confusing, you didn't just shake it off, you might seek a cleansing ritual, burning herbs, or sleeping with a protective charm. You shift slightly in the bed, the blanket's scratchy, someone's toes are alarmingly cold. But the air is calm now, deep. And even though the roof creaks and the fire has faded, you feel oddly safe. Because in this world, sleep isn't quiet solitude, it's community. It's shared breath, shared warmth, shared fears. It's messy, it's sacred, it's life. And when the rooster crows in a few short hours, you'll rise together, stretch together, face the cold together. But for now, you sleep. All of you. Clang! You flinch. It's not a dream this time. It's the bell. The one that slices the night like a sword through linen. The sound is cold, iron pure, and final. It echoes across the rooftops, down the alleyways, and straight through your chest. Because in medieval Europe, no matter who you were, monk, merchant, or milkmaid, your sleep didn't belong to you. It belonged to the bell tower. You rub your eyes. The darkness isn't gone, but it's thinner now, gray at the edges. The village is still sleeping, mostly, but above you, the great bell keeps ringing. Not an alarm, not a warning, just a reminder. Time belongs to God. The canonical hours ruled everything. Matins, lauds, prime, terce, sects, none, vespers, compline, a divine schedule chanted across centuries. And while it started in monasteries, the rhythm bled outward, ringing into towns and cities. Even secular life danced to the bell's command. So yes, even your dreams were on a clock. In some villages, people adjusted their entire sleep cycle around the church bells. If you were lucky enough to doze off before matins, great, but if not, too bad. You were expected to rise, light a candle, and pray. Even if your bed was warm and your bones were tired, especially then, you get up, groggy. You shuffle to the window. Somewhere across the fields, another bell answers fainter, but in sync. The sound stretches across parishes like a net, keeping everyone tethered to the same sacred rhythm. Historians agree, the bell wasn't just a timekeeper. It was a spiritual metronome, dividing human life into holy intervals. It reminded people they weren't living for themselves. Every hour had meaning. Every interruption had a purpose. But here's the quirky twist. In some towns, the bell ringer was paid not just in wages but in bread, eggs, or beer. There are records of disputes over missed bell tolls. One village even punished their ringer with public scolding for oversleeping on a feast day. Irony alert. And bells weren't just clocks, they were watchmen. If you died in your sleep, the bell would ring to announce it. If you gave birth, if a fire broke out, if soldiers approached, the bell told everyone. Even if your bed was a mile away. The bell knew what you didn't. Still, not everyone loved being woken by iron sound. There are accounts of villagers muffling their windows with cloth. Others timed their sleep between bell rings, estimating how many hours they could squeeze in before the next interruption. And in one case from a 15th century France, a blacksmith moved his bed into the forge just to escape the bell's reach. Bold, loud, probably hot. Modern scholars still argue, was this a form of community cohesion or just imposed obedience? Did the bells unify people in shared purpose, or merely fracture their nights into divine micromanagement? You sit on the edge of your straw mattress now, staring at your feet. The sky outside is lightening. The birds are starting, someone down the lane is already hauling water, and you wonder what it would be like to sleep without the bell, to dream until you chose to wake. To live a night ruled only by your body, your breath, your own rhythm. But then again, without the bell, how would you know who you were? You lie back down just for a moment. The ringing has stopped, but the silence it leaves behind is even louder. And somewhere in that silence, you realize the bell wasn't just time, it was purpose. The room is quiet again, but this time, you're not reaching for comfort. You're reaching for confession. Because in medieval Europe, sleep wasn't just for the body, it was a battleground for the soul. And every night, just before you closed your eyes, you were expected to ask yourself a question. What did I do wrong today? You lie there, staring up at the ceiling beams, and feel the weight of the day. Not just the aches and pains of labor, but the invisible ones: envy, laziness, lust, especially lust. Because in medieval Christian theology, sin didn't wait for daylight. It came at night, in dreams, in thoughts. In the warmth of a shared blanket, you were taught that your soul was vulnerable during sleep. That temptation crept in while you let your guard down. So before you drifted off, you were meant to confess, silently, maybe, or aloud to your priest earlier that day. Or, in some monasteries, in front of the whole community. And yes, there were sins of sleep itself. Sloth was a big one. If you overslept, if you napped when there was work to do, if you lounged a little too long under the covers, congratulations. You were officially sinning, and people took it seriously. There are monastic records where monks were punished for being late to matins by as little as 5 minutes. The punishment: standing barefoot on cold stone during prayer. Then there were the dream sins. Lustful dreams. Yep, counted against you. Theologians argued over whether a sinful dream was truly your fault, but many believed it revealed the state of your soul. And so, people confessed dreams, not just to priests, but to friends, to spouses, even to God, while kneeling beside the bed with trembling hands and a pounding heart. One fringe belief from rural Italy: if you dreamed of kissing someone outside your marriage, you had to fast for a day to cleanse your mouth. Another odd custom: in some regions, couples recited a bedtime confession to each other, just in case one of them died during the night. It was half forgiveness, half insurance. You sit up a little now, the blanket wrapped around your shoulders. The air smells like damp wood and beeswax. You whisper a few words, not because you think anyone's listening, but because part of you hopes someone is. Historians still debate how much of this was genuine spiritual anxiety, and how much was just pressure from the church. Did peasants really feel guilty for dreaming? Or were these teachings more aspirational than practiced? Some argue that sleep guilt was overblown by monastic writers. Others say even illiterate farmers carried the weight of nightly judgment, passed down by sermons, stories, and fear. Either way, the result was the same. Bedtime wasn't just physical, it was moral, a tiny moral trial, every single night. And if you died in your sleep, that was the test. There's a term, mors improvisa, the unexpected death. It terrified people, because if you hadn't confessed, hadn't repented, hadn't cleared your ledger, you might go straight to damnation. In some places, people kept their shoes facing the door, just in case they needed to be ready for sudden judgment. And if you survived the night, well, then you thanked God in the morning. Literally, morning prayers often included lines like, "Thank you, Lord, for sparing me through the hours of darkness," because nothing was guaranteed. You lie back again, slowly, eyes heavy, not just from exhaustion, but from carrying the invisible weight of being human in a world where even your dreams could condemn you. And as sleep returns, your last thought isn't about dreams or demons. It's this: forgive me if I failed. Your breath slows, your limbs go still, and now sleep feels different. Not like a pause, more like a surrender. Because in medieval Europe, the boundary between sleep and death was almost non-existent, and no one treated it lightly. You lie perfectly still, under a heavy woolen blanket, and for a moment you wonder, if I didn't wake up, would anyone know? That question was common. So common that nightly prayers often included phrases like, "If I shall not wake again, receive me, Lord." You weren't just falling asleep. You were practicing for death, and the imagery reflected that. People referred to sleep as a little death. Tombs were carved with figures lying peacefully, arms crossed over the chest, eyes closed, not in agony, but as if napping. The phrase "rest in peace" didn't begin in cemeteries. It began in bedrooms. One common bedtime ritual involved blessing your body, part by part: your eyes, your lips, your heart, asking for protection not just through the night, but through the unknown. Because if something went wrong, if your soul drifted too far, you might never come back. You shift slightly now, aware of your own breathing, a reminder that you're still here, still warm, still dreaming. But medieval people lived in a world where death came quickly. Unexpectedly, you could die from infection, childbirth, frostbite, or fire, and often in your sleep. That's why some households insisted on sleeping with a cross nearby, or a confession already made, just in case. Even the layout of the bed reflected this blurred line. It was common for the head of the bed to face east, toward Jerusalem, so that if death came during the night, you'd be aligned properly for resurrection. Some people went further, sleeping in their burial shrouds. Not always every night, but in times of plague, famine, or war, it was surprisingly common. Quirky fact: in 14th century France, there's a record of a noblewoman who ordered a deathbed built into her bedroom, not a coffin, but a second bed, carved with biblical scenes, where she could sleep as if already claimed by God. Morbid, sure, but also kind of poetic. And then there were dreams, those final ones, the ones people whispered about. If you dreamed of a white horse, or a door closing, or a candle flickering out, it meant something. Maybe not right away, but soon. Villagers traded stories of men who'd dreamed of falling, or sinking, or flying into clouds, and died within the week. Historians still debate the cultural weight of these death-sleep parallels. Some say it was a theological reflection, sleep as soul preparation. Others argue it was emotional survival. If you saw loved ones die quietly in bed, it helped to believe they were simply sleeping deeper. You pull the blanket up now, just under your chin. A draft curls in from under the door. The fire has gone out. You can hear your heart steady, soft, undecided. And for just a moment, you imagine what it would be like not to wake up. Not out of fear, but out of understanding. That sleep is not the opposite of life, but a quieter version of it, one step to the side. In this world, to sleep was to die gently, and to die was, perhaps, to keep dreaming. It's still dark when you open your eyes again, but something's different now. You're not in your bed. You're underground. Stone walls, cold air, silence so deep it hums. You're lying in what looks like a bed, but it's carved from marble. And you're dressed not in linen nightclothes, but in robes, hands folded, eyes shut forever. Welcome to eternal sleep, the kind medieval Europe took very, very seriously. You're in a tomb, but it was designed to look like a bed, a final one. Many grave monuments from the Middle Ages show the dead reclining, peaceful, often holding prayer books or rosaries. Their heads rest on stone pillows. Their feet sometimes press against a carved dog, a symbol of loyalty, or perhaps just a final nighttime companion. And they called it rest, literally, rest in peace. Because death wasn't an ending, it was just a deeper sleep. You walk now, slowly, through the dim nave of a cathedral. Effigies lie side by side like slumbering couples. A knight in armor beside his wife, a bishop in full robes, a child holding a lamb. Each figure sculpted not in agony, but in serenity. Sleep, not death. Some tombs were designed with bed curtains carved in stone, pulled back slightly, as if the sleeper might rise any moment. Others included cadaver tombs, showing both the peaceful face of the deceased and their decaying corpse beneath a haunting reminder that all beauty fades, but sleep continues. And then there were the burial practices. Some were buried in their actual beds, the same one they had slept in for decades, wrapped in linen like a child swaddled one final time. In parts of Eastern Europe, there were even customs where family members would sleep beside the dead for a final night, to keep them company before burial. Not morbid, just human. You sit down beside one such tomb. A worn inscription reads, "Dormit in Domino," sleeps in the Lord. And here's a strange historical twist. Some people feared being buried not because of death, but because they might wake up. Premature burial was a real fear, so much so that wealthy individuals were occasionally buried with bells in their coffins. If they awoke, they could ring it and a watchman above might hear. One assumes might is doing a lot of work there. Still, the transition from bed to tomb wasn't just poetic, it was intentional. Sleep trained the soul. It reminded you that each night could be your last, that each morning was a small resurrection. Even the prayers for the dying echoed bedtime rituals. A blessing, a whispered Latin phrase, a hand crossed over the chest, and sometimes a lullaby. Yes, really. In parts of medieval Spain, People sang death lullabies, gentle, lilting songs to accompany someone's last breaths. They believed the soul needed soothing, just like a child. Now you lie back again, in the imagined quiet of that stone tomb, or perhaps just your bed. The blanket feels heavier now, or maybe that's the weight of the world slowly lifting. The fire is out. The house is still. The bell won't ring again until morning. And in this stillness, this hush carved between breath and forgetting, you understand what medieval sleep truly was. A ritual, a rehearsal, a return. A whispered goodbye to the waking world. Just in case, you close your eyes, not out of fear, but out of trust, because tonight, you rest in peace. The world fades gently now. No bells, no saints, no whispers of breath on stone. Just the slow, uncoiling quiet of a night that no longer demands anything from you. Your body feels heavier, but not in a painful way. It's more like being wrapped in something warm and old, like moss on stone. Or a hymn you don't remember learning but somehow still know. You are lying in a place beyond fear, beyond clocks, beyond sin or salvation. There are no demons here, no judging dreams, no footsteps in the dark. Only the soft pull of sleep, like a tide inching toward shore. And you don't need to confess anymore, or turn east, or whisper Latin. You just need to breathe. The way peasants did under shared blankets, the way monks did, kneeling in silence, the way a queen did, draped in velvet, hands folded like wings. This sleep belongs to no one but you, and it asks for nothing, not even dreams. Your heartbeat slows, your breath lengthens, your fingers uncurl. You are safe. You are still. You are allowed to drift. The fire has burned out. The shutters are closed. The bell is silent. The saints have left the room, and no one is watching. Good night.